So, hello everyone. Really exciting to get this conversation going with Stephanie-Rae. And so, hi Stephanie.
Hi. So I'm Stephanie-Rae. I have recently just graduated from the RVC, and I'm 3 weeks into my first veterinary job, which is amazing and quite scary at the same time, but it's really exciting. I also came via the Gateway program at RVC, so I used one of the foundation routes to get onto the veterinary medicine degree.
Wonderful. So thanks for sharing some of that background, and I really want to get into that with you, and I think we'll come to the question about the Gateway in a short bit, but I wanted to go back to the beginning and to what made you want to become a vet.
So I was quite fortunate actually to grow up with a lot of weird and wonderful animals. So thanks to my dad, if you imagine, so I'm from North London, just a girl growing up in a North London house. In the back garden, we had a bit of a zoo. So we had lots of exotics. So it was really cool. We've had birds of prey, we've had reptiles, amphibians. We also did have cats and dogs. So some of the stuff that probably people might expect you to have. And so that early exposure for me was really, really beneficial. I think I was also a bit torn between creative subjects. I was really interested in art, really interested in music as well. And so I think throughout school, I was you're always trying lots of different things. But I think I hit a turning point when I got to secondary school and I realized that I do want to work with animals. I didn't know in what capacity when I'd first started secondary school, but I knew that I think I used to tell people that I want to be a vet, or it's one of those things that you see on TV, you see in the media that that's the most one of the most accessible ways into working with animals. So I wasn't really decided completely until probably year 9, year 10. And then I was like, you know what, I'm actually going to try and work towards that goal. And I was really interested in science as well. So it kind of seemed to be like a good marrying of both interest in science, biology particularly, and then helping animals.
Cool. I mean, I think what really interests me about your story is this, that you had a combined interest in art as well. And so you had a real love for art and music. And that was also a potential for you at one stage of your life. So what you said year 9 or 10, but what was kind of was there a defining moment, or did you just evolve into thinking, you know what, the pull to animals is stronger than the pull to music? Because I think it's really important for people to recognize that you don't always just have one thing that you want to do. Sometimes it's a choice. And so, yeah, what made that choice for you?
I think for me, so I know that things like music and creative, there are a lot of people I know at vet school that are so creative, and they have these other things that you take on as hobbies. I think for me, I found that I think probably about year 8 time, I ended up, it sounds a bit weird, but I ended up looking after my own ferrets. And actually for me, it kind of was an experience where, my dad had said well, you're going to look after these are going to be your pets, you take control of them. And I think I obviously had a lot of responsibility there, and caring for kits, and then letting them grow up and keeping them as adults. And I think for me that I was really then ingrained and focused on, let me take care of them. What could I do with this? And then obviously if things came up and, you'd have to take them to the vets or figure out ways forward, even with our own pets, I think I was just really inclined into knowing a bit more about so he's feeling a bit down today. Why is that the thing? Why is he feeling that way? And I think just those little questions and that curiosity was probably what drove me a lot more. And I found that I love spending so much time on my artwork, but as I'll explain later on, because I did take it at A level, I found myself really getting absorbed into it, but I didn't feel myself wanting to progress it as a career. I think I wanted to keep it as a hobby. I wanted to keep it as something that would be my release and my stress relief if I could find the time to do it instead.
Wonderful. So do you still do art now?
Not as much as I'd like to, but I have done some pet portraits for some friends and things, and just little things on the side which are nice, and it actually just feels like I can take my time, and it doesn't feel like work that I'm kind of pushing myself and having to force myself to do. So I wish I could do it more. I think hopefully once this job settles down and I've settled in my first few months, then hopefully pick up the pencils again.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I want to get to this conversation of social elevation, and how sometimes in some cultures, it's really important that the next generation does better than the generation before. And that's really a lot of what the investment into education is about. So how did your family receive your ambition of wanting to become a vet?
So I think both my mum and dad were really, really supportive. And so for me, I am the first person in my family to go to university. Neither of my parents went to university. And so for them, it was also a new territory. And I think I'm the eldest of 3 girls. So it was kind of like you have that weird like guinea pig kind of phase that, you know, we kind of jokingly call it, because it was new for them just as much as it was new for me. And so I think especially with something like veterinary, I think a lot of people are aware, and people that have tried applying from school, teachers aren't always the most helpful just because they just don't know enough about the profession or the access routes to the profession. And so I found that I had to do a lot of my own research, and also my parents were helping me. So I know my dad did try to see if he could find some work experience for me or speak to people that he'd kind of seen at work. Likewise, my mum, if she'd heard anything, she would let me know. But ultimately it was kind of like, Steph, you look up what you want to do. I could come and speak to them if I need to, and they'll be like, yeah, we'll support you in any which way we can. You know, if that meant that they were going to try and drive me to somewhere, because otherwise I'd be taking public transport, or, you know, just kind of making sure that they were there for me at the end of the day. Even if I'd gone and done things myself, I can come back and speak through my process with them.
That's wonderful. So they were really supportive in kind of making sure you were able to fulfill all of the things that you needed, the criteria you needed to fulfill before you got to vet school, like all your work experience and stuff. So if we move forward, well, actually, can we stay in high school? In terms of your careers guidance and stuff like that, how was the support that you got at high school level to try to get you ready for vet school? Because I know you said you did lots of research yourself. So what was the support like in school? And then how did you know to do the research yourself, I guess is the question.
Yeah, so I found that I was always kind of ending up in the pool of students. You know, you had a pool of students that were really bright people that they wanted to push to look at universities. And so I ended up being a part of lots of sort of extracurricular programs, probably around year 9, year 10, year 11 time for my school. So I was on an Access HE kind of program as well, where I did some extra mentoring, and I had support. We did an Easter school at Cambridge and all these other things. And these were really beneficial just because they were a nice kind of dipping your toe into what university could be like. And I know that a lot of schools kind of go down the route of who wants to go to Russell Group unis, who wants to go to Oxbridge, and then sort of like any other universities that people want to go to. So I feel like we were kind of very much pigeonholed into considering university, which was fine for me personally, because that's kind of where I saw myself going. I did have an advisor in particular who was really, really helpful, and she got me one of my first links into the outreach team at RVC. And so between creating that contact, that meant that I found that RVC was a lot more accessible to me at that point. And she was really pushing for me. But likewise, I think the teachers that I had would admit where they didn't really know enough about the veterinary profession or how to get into veterinary. They knew enough about medicine and kind of, you know, the entry exams and things like that, and could guide people that way. But for me, I think that's the reason why I felt like I had to do so much of my own research, just because they did admit, we're not sure where we can, you know, you need to kind of tell us where we can help you, because we aren't that sure, which actually I was quite appreciative of, rather than them trying to, you know, force things upon me that may or may not have kind of helped or hindered the process in a way. And I think because I think they kind of entrusted in me, even though I was like 15, 16 years old, you know, having that level of responsibility, because I knew that I could, I had a plan in my head and I was able to articulate that. And so therefore, you know, they were like, right, well, we'll get you these resources, we'll get you onto this program or scheme. I think I was also, they helped me when I needed to potentially have taken the BMAT exam, and my school covered the training for that and would have covered the fees had I had to have sat the exam as well for the entry. So I feel like I was quite lucky that I had individuals that were really good at supporting me. And I know some people aren't as lucky in having that level of support even as well.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And like you say, it's a matter of all the stars aligning and getting that luck working in your favor. And that works really well for you. So you mentioned before that you entered the RCVS on the Gateway program. So can you tell us, how did you find vet school?
I loved vet school. You know, I think I loved university. I loved vet school, but I think that I found that my vet school experience, I definitely was really throwing myself into extracurricular stuff and really throwing myself into lots and lots of other projects, which meant that I felt like I had to use my university time, not only just for the sake of getting my degree and being a vet, but also using it to utilize other opportunities in either personal or professional development, and just kind of, you know, and growth almost. I feel like the first 2 years of university are kind of getting to gain your independence and, you know, trialing so many different and new things. And then by the time I got to the end of my degree, and the more confident I felt with the program and the course remotely, you know, I then could feel myself being like, right, well, what else do I want to do? Because I know that a lot of people, you find that when you ask people what they do, people take vet as their identity, that I am a vet, that is my personal identity. And I kind of wanted to not let that be the only, you know, the be all and end all of my personality, of my character, of what I can do. So I found myself joining lots of other things. And I don't regret any of the things that I've done, and the things that will hopefully propel me into doing more now that I am actually a vet as well.
Yeah, that's a really intuitive and wise approach to utilize your time in vet school as much as you possibly can to, like you say, do other things so that your identity is not tied up into being a vet. And I think that that's something a lot of us struggle with when we've worked so hard to become a vet, to not make that your full kind of your full identity. But so tell me a bit about animal aspirations, because that leads really nicely into animal aspirations. So what is animal aspirations for people who don't know, and what made you decide to be part of it?
So Animal Aspirations is a group that was co-founded by Lavinia Economou and Steph Stapleton back in 2019. And I was one of the part of the founding members and the founding group for the project. And essentially, a lot of us had been a part of the outreach, doing the student ambassador work for the outreach team at RVC anyway. And obviously their main aim is to get people from widening participation backgrounds, so low socioeconomic backgrounds, etc., into veterinary medicine and other animal related careers, veterinary nursing, the biosciences program, etc. as well. And so I think at that point, we'd found a niche where we could kind of collaborate and bring together all of our own experiences and all of these sort of things that we're talking about today, different hurdles, different barriers that we might have faced that we don't really want other people to have to face, or necessarily if they're going through it themselves, maybe we can be people and role models that they can look up to and come for help for. So we set up Animal Aspirations, and essentially our aim was then to go out to schools and target school pupils or young children to try and get them thinking about veterinary careers early, because I think a lot of us appreciated that a fair few of us actually didn't really have much exposure to animals. Like I said, I was quite lucky that I did. A lot of us didn't necessarily have that exposure, and so knowing that sometimes that can be the key difference. Someone having a positive experience with animals at an early age is an experience they might take with them going forward and might actually now consider the program. It's not the be all and end all if they don't want to be a vet, but at least we've given them the exposure, and at least we've given them the help and said, you know, if you need anything in the future, we're here for you. And to raise not only discussions about veterinary medicine, but also we ended up, especially with the BLM things that were going on in the past year and a half or so, we found ourselves almost kind of advocating for more of this progress in the general and wider profession as well, which I think we didn't necessarily expect to be the case. However, as a body of students that can relate to a lot of the experiences and could relate to a lot of the emotions that were going around the time, we felt that it was necessary to kind of speak up on those things. And it's great because we've been able to then go on and talk at lots of different conferences and events, and we've worked with so many different external organizations, so we're building the community even more. And it's great that it's at other vet schools now as well, which is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's amazing. And I think, when I first heard about animal aspirations, I was blown away that it was set up by students actually, and that students were taking such responsibility for making change within our professions. And then knowing now that it's expanded to other universities, I think it's such an amazing step and can only lead to greater things. So as a student, my next question, you were able to be part or work with the regulator, the RCVS, so the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons, and you were co-chair of a group. So can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
So it was a really, really good experience, and I was really appreciated being nominated and voted in as co-chair for that group. Essentially, so again, like after the BLM movement and the death of George Floyd and all of this, all this stuff that went on, we were invited to, I know the RCVS held a roundtable and invited students from all the other universities, and essentially was a moment where we could all reflect on not only what had happened, but the improvements that needed to be made in the profession and how we can better the profession to make it more inclusive and make it more accessible, particularly for BAME individuals. And so of that roundtable, we had formulated this smaller group, which was to be the student, sort of the student BAME working group, essentially looking at targeting sort of issues about students on EMS placements and discrimination that they're experiencing there, and also looking better at reporting and reporting systems and the structures around those, because obviously a lot of universities have reporting systems for anonymous reporting, as well as just giving non-anonymized statements as well. But we realize that there's so much that's going on within the different vet schools that actually isn't coming to light, and also even if it is coming to light, students aren't feeling that those processes are being fulfilled, and which is obviously really, really concerning. And so we as a group wanted to come together and figure out ways to better those processes that are already in place, but also what guidance do people need to improve, what support is needed for students as well as staff that are also kind of coming under that bubble of then the support network for those particular students, just because they have that common ground. And so and it was a real pleasure to be a part of that group, and I think it was nice having the opportunity from animal aspirations and stepping up to something slightly bigger on a slightly wider scale. And again, it's just the networking that comes from it. And I think especially after the pandemic and still doing things a lot over Zoom, it was still lovely to be able to have these really frank and open and slightly uncomfortable conversations with people, but people are willing to listen, and people are willing to share their experiences in that safe space.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, I think it was a really good step, and there were really good outcomes, which we'll see in the weeks and months ahead. So my final couple questions. Now you're a vet, congratulations.
Thank you.
How does it feel?
It feels like, it's for me, it was like 6 years worth of studying, and it's strange because even after graduation this year, I was quite lucky at least to still celebrate it with some people, even though we didn't have it in person. It just kind of still felt like I've got this title now, I don't know what to do with it. It feels really strange, but I feel like you do have to reflect and think of over those 6 years, you've passed your exams, you've worked really hard, you've got over these different little hurdles, you've worked through so much, and then doing all these other things around on the side as well. It feels great and it's a big achievement, it's a big milestone, I think, as well, just to say that you've got to the end of it all, and now it's lovely. I'm quite lucky to be in a really supportive environment at the moment. The staff that I'm working with are absolutely lovely. They've not thrown me in at the deep end at all or anything like that. I've been shadowing and just kind of building up my confidence again, especially after the year that we had and how turbulent it was with experience and things like that. So it's nice to feel that I'm actually coming into my own, and that I'm capable of doing this job. I think you kind of sometimes, it's a bit strange when you come from doing so much experience before vet school to then just be studying and then kind of be slowly doing experience out the other end without the responsibility, and now having the responsibility. It's going to be it'll be interesting, but actually I'm just happy that I got through it, to be fair. And it just feels like such an achievement, which is really nice.
Absolutely. And I think that idea of, being in a really supportive environment makes a huge difference. I remember when I graduated, it was really the environment I was in was hugely supportive. And so you kind of graduate and you think, oh, I'm supposed to know everything, but genuinely know that you don't. But having people around you who could just ask a question and there's no judgment, and they would, like you say, you can shadow people and see how to do things and how it's done in that practice, because every practice does things differently than you would have at university. So that's really, really good that you've got that environment. So my final question to finish on is, how are your parents feeling now that you've graduated?
They are very happy. They were, it's just one of those things that it was funny as well, because I ended up my official because the graduation time, or when we were actually confirmed to join the register, was the 18th of June, which is my mum's birthday. So I think it was a nice birthday gift for her, when I was like, I've actually, I've got these letters after my name, and I'm part of the members of the RCVS and this and the other, and so it was actually really nice, kind of coinciding event as well. But I think they're just thankful, that they've and the same will go for my two younger sisters as well. They've I've got my middle sister still going for university. My youngest sister, she's still in school, but is now going to be slowly looking up to university options. And they've done it with me. So I think hopefully it gives them some level of confidence and reassurance that if I can do it, they can do it too. They've been so supportive for me, and they'll continue to be supportive for them as well, which is great.
So role model to all. That sounds wonderful. Thank you very much, Stephanie-Rae.
That's all right. Thank you very much.